And then here's an example of my board. And as you can see, like on the left, it's just super bare bones, just circles, spaces. And then on the right, it's a little more. Oh, on the left too, on the bottom is my item distribution. So I was like, okay, in first place, they get certain items. Second place gets these items. And then on the right side is my little more professional looking map of one of the racetracks and some spaces. And I'm going to show you this in a little more detail and a little more blown up so you can appreciate it. Okay, before I get into that, let me show you this. Okay. Yes, you can see it perfect. All right, so I just went into Adobe Illustrator and I fleshed it out a little bit more. Once again, it's just to be as quickly as possible to get something out. And now what I can do, because I have all these assets, I can go and just like copy and paste these into a Word document and then print it and then cut it out and then start, play testing. So basically the idea is that you start around the board, you move your tokens 2 spaces at a time. If you get hit, you can only move 1 space the next turn. You hit these drifting zones, which allow you to put yourself in a drifting state, and you can move 3 spaces the next turn. You get items depending on the placement you're in. You get different items. So if you're like in first place, you get these items, which of course are more defensive to keep you in first place. But then if you're in fourth, you get the catch-up items. If you are familiar with Mario Kart. And then over here on the right, these are like your player cards. You have little tokens to tell you what placement you're in. This is where you would place your item cards so you can know like, okay, this is my item in slot number 1 and slot number 2. And you can use only, of course, the item in slot number 1 before you can use the item in slot number 2. And then your racing state. So if like you're driving, you move 2 spaces per turn. If you're drifting, you can then move 3 spaces your next turn. If you're swerving, you only move half a space. Swerving is like if you get hit. Stalled, if you do get hit, you lose a turn. So you can move this token kind of up and down depending on what state you're in. All right. So that's essentially my Mario Kart board game that I made. And so once again, I'm just really trying to emphasize the point of testing out, creating something as quickly as possible. I did this in a matter of, let's say, I did the very crude creation in like 2 hours, play tested it about an hour. This took me a little bit longer. This was maybe about 3 hours of work. But all in all, it once again captures the essence of Mario Kart, the item distribution, some of the mechanics, and then now I can go into expanding this a little bit more, maybe adding a few extra items, uh, working on the balancing, working on probabilities, because you may realize, oh, like fourth place gets too many good items, or the probability of getting a certain item is too high, and then you can add cards to the deck to change that. And so that then helps you once again when you start programming the game, right? Like when you actually take your game into the video game engine and then you start testing it that way, it makes it a little bit faster and easier because you kind of already understand your balancing or the feel for it. All right, so back to the presentation. All right, so the next logical step, of course, is your proof of concept video game. So we talked about Mario, and we have Celeste here as an example of platforming. Celeste is a wonderful. Oh, thank you so much. Also, I'm seeing the chats. Celeste is a wonderful example for rapid game prototyping, especially since it was originally created in a game jam. So basically, it tests everything. It's just a platforming game. It's essentially Mario, or like if you guys know Super Meat Boy, it's just a platform. It's platforming at its core. So yeah, you have like obstacles, you have spikes, you have the platforms that like throw you over really quickly. Let me see. Hold on. Allows me to change. Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm just looking at chat. But yes, okay. So environmental hazards. This is Hollow Knight. So the Path of Pain. That's also platform heavy, right? But you can test mechanics of these spike wheels that are in Path of Pain. You can test power-ups. So in Mario, I put a little Mario, and you can see, well, maybe a little hard to see, but he's using the fire flower. And so the idea is not to once again create a full-fledged game. The idea is to create like a singular level or a singular mechanic and test that out. And your goal is to make it fun, to find the fun of this thing that you're trying to implement, right? So how do you make throwing fireballs fun? How do you make dodging and parrying in Elden Ring fun, right? Like you would just create a simulation. Maybe you, let's say for Elden Ring, right? Like you give your character infinite health so they don't die. Maybe they do get like knockback, but you're just testing, okay, how do I test the dodge over and over and over? And does it work? Does it feel good? Is the timing okay? Once again, everything just to save you time. All right, and so continuing on with Celeste, game jams. I know this group is big on game jams, so game jams is definitely the best way to go about. Game jams, to me, in my opinion, are essentially rapid game prototyping, because you create a concept, and for anyone who may or may not know, this was the original Celeste. These top 3 images. Um, so this is your main screen. Look, it doesn't. It's so bare bones compared to the final product, which is down below. Because once again, you're just trying to get the feel for a concept, physics, mechanics, stuff like that. All right, so I'm looking good on time so far, which is great. Part 2, documentation. So the objective of this is communication. You want to effectively let potential investors, friends, other gamers, buyers know what your game is about. And it can come in 3 different forms. Your full-on design document, which you'll use to talk to your team about, your high concept and elevator pitch for, once again, pitching to friends or investors, and then an instruction or user manual at the end to kind of help the player along starting the game. And you'll see a really good example I have for that. All right, so the design document essentially describes every facet of a game, right? Games are made of art, mechanics, programming, sound, music. Can you, as a creator, as a developer, as a designer, convey everything your game needs to have that you want to have to your team, right? Um, and when I say this, I mean like literally down to every portion of the game. So I'm going to go back to Mario's jump, for example. So how does Mario's jump work, right? You press the A button, and he goes, how high does Mario jump? He jumps maybe about like 30 pixels high. Okay. Does he float left or right? Can you manipulate him in the air when he's in the air? How much so? So there's like a horizontal velocity, right? While he's like in midair. Can you move him a little faster? You hold down the B button. What else? Uh, if you get hit, right? Like, an animation example. When Mario gets a mushroom, right? He grows. What happens when he grows? The whole screen pauses. The gameplay completely pauses. All the enemies stop moving. So you need to convey all of this to your programming team. What happens? He flashes a few times. We'll go to the art department. He flashes a few times, grows a little bit bigger in size, maybe like double size in pixels. Same thing if he gets hit, he shrinks, everything pauses. Sound and music, what are you trying to convey in the feeling, right? Like, is the music more flowy because it's like smooth, chill, tranquil? Or is it more intense, rock? Something's happening, a big boss battle. So these are all things you can write up in your document to convey to your team. And once again, when we look at the instruction manual, you'll see a little bit better idea of this too, especially with the game mechanics and programming aspect. All right, so this goes into a little bit more of what I'm talking about with each mechanic or each field. Sorry. So art. So is it a 2D game? Is it a 3D game? This is Plucky, if anyone knows Plucky the Squire, which uses art direction of both. It is both 3D and 2D game, which is a cute game. If you guys check it out. Mechanics and programming. Here we go. So look, everything that's on this screen, you have the word dodge with an arrow to the right. You want to convey that to your team so that when you press the joystick right, you are dodging the next attack. Your jab is the Y button. Your hook is A, and then left stick, left or right. You have a health bar. The enemy has a health bar, or the boss in this case has a health bar. These are all things that you want to try to be as detailed as possible in your game document. You are, oh, thank you for sharing that. You are making it easier. The communication, once again, is making it easier for the person who's going to pick up your document to understand what they need to do. Because if you're just very, if you're very like vague or brief, then your programmer or your artist or your sound designer, they're just going to start to take liberties, or they'll have to come back to you with more and more questions, right? And you don't want that. You don't want. Think about it too. Like if any of you guys are streamers and make like emotes with an artist, right? And then you say, "Oh, I want an emote of this," and then you kind of like go back and forth with the artist, and they say, "Oh, do you like this design?" And you're like, "No, I." If you couldn't just conveyed it a little more clearly or tried a little harder to convey what you want, then you won't go back and forth so many on these iterations. Sound and music. So here, this is a little more abstract, of course, because once again, you're talking about like concepts like how does it make you feel or what's the type of sound, but you can still see Plucky on the left, he's doing an attack, and there's this like ZOK sound that comes up to kind of emphasize the hit. And then the character, this Moonbeard character on the right, he's very music centric. So you have all these like music notes, and he's a DJ, so it's a fun character. Okay, so high concept and pitch. So basically, your high concept is a single sentence to describe the game at its core. Returning to Celeste, because Celeste to me is one of the best examples of rapid game prototyping again. So I did my best to write a high concept. So this is my high concept. And so I wrote, a young woman overcomes her anxiety and depression as she jumps, dashes, and climbs to the summit of a mountain. I don't know if you guys agree or not, if you feel like that conveys the idea of what Celeste is. It doesn't get, this is a Celeste fan club meeting. This doesn't get, too much detailed in the obstacles or the secondary characters. It's just capturing the core of what Celeste is to hopefully show a person like, oh, you know what? We haven't a woman protagonist coming over her anxiety in like a platforming game. That's pretty interesting. Okay, where are you trying to go with it? That right. So once you kind of like have your hook, then you can maybe once you have your foot in the door, so last comment. Once you have your foot in the door, you can then expand on it, right? So your elevator pitch might be 30 seconds to a minute. The idea of an elevator pitch is right, like you get stuck in an elevator, or I shouldn't say stuck, but like you're in an elevator and you realize you're standing next to a designer or a publisher, and you're like, oh my god, like I have my chance to pitch my idea to this person, right? But you don't know how long you're going to be in the elevator with that person because maybe they're going to get off on the next floor or two. So it's like you want to quickly convey your game idea to them. And so once again, this is all about communication. Okay, what do I say in 30 seconds to a minute to like get them to give me funding so I can make Celeste Part 2 or the next better Celeste. All right, and so the last portion is the instruction manual or the user manual for anyone who grew up in the days of NES games, Super NES games, N64 games, PlayStation 2, maybe the original Xbox. Because we all know that games nowadays don't come with instruction manuals like they used to. I buy my Switch games still, the physical copies, and they're just empty. But yeah, so basically the instruction manual is essentially a mini documentation. It's a mini game doc. It doesn't go into details like once again with the Mario jump, right? Like, oh, how many pixels is Mario jumping, and does he float in the air left or right as he's in the air? Can he manipulate his direction? It made an instruction manual doesn't go into that detail, right? You'll still need to include that in your own documentation, but that doesn't mean that you can't look at one of these references and still get a really good idea of how you should make your own game document. This is a great starting point. So it kind of goes over the plot, the menu, the HUD, the controls, items, and power ups, some tips. So, Link to the Past, and I have this example. No, how do I get out of here? Forgive me. Let's do. There we go. That's what I want to show. Okay. So, all right. So here's the Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. Came out on Super Nintendo. So table of contents. We're just gonna skip through. We're just gonna skim through this kind of quickly. But the first few pages talk about the story. It's very brief, but it gives you an idea of what the game is about, what the plot is. As we move down, well, actually, it goes through the plot a lot. As we go down, you meet some of the characters, who's the main focus point of the game. Starting the game, look, it goes over the menu system. How many people maybe overlook the menu system in their own games? What happens when you select settings? What kind of options do you have? Can you remap the controls? So these are once again things that can you communicate this with your programmer? So you have a player select screen. You can type in your name. You can erase the player. You can copy a player, so you can essentially copy your file, create a new file. Like, are these things that you want to put in your own game? A file and save system. Here's the viewing the main and subscreens. Let me make this a little bit larger for you guys. So it's an explanation of what everything is. There's the rubies, the items, the magic meter, your health bar. Everything is explained. This is a wonderful, once again, example. Here's the controls. Where are all the buttons? What do they all do? You create something like this with a little bit more detail for your programmers, your artists, your sound designers, and you can just then theoretically sit back and they'll make the game for you, right? Unless you are the programmer, but it makes it easier for yourself too. Because then there's once again less back and forth. Like, oh, hey, what is this thing supposed to do? What's the mechanic of this? Control pad, moving it. Look, even just as simple as walking is explained in fine detail for this. And I'll just go ahead and keep swimming, talking, reading. I'll go ahead and just continue scrolling through this a little bit. Because it even goes through the world map, it goes through items, it goes through power-ups. So yeah, this is a perfect example. I've included it on this presentation. I think this presentation was shared with all you guys. Go back. And this still does not, oh, there we go. I was like, this still does not want me to. Okay, here we go. All right, so wrapping up. So once again, the objective, test, components, mechanics, the feeling of your game as quickly as possible to save time, whether it's in a board game, whether it's in a game jam, whether it's just you're just making a dodging mechanic, whatever it is, to test something in a small environment as quickly as possible, and then convey your vision, convey your document, write out your documentation, be as detailed as possible. And this is all just to save you time, save you resources, save you money, because time is so precious. Everybody knows that, how much you don't want to just start programming away in your Unity, in your Unreal, and then get way too caught up, and then you realize, oh, wait, I can't do this crazy Doom clone first-person shooter. It's not gonna work. So yeah. And oh yeah, last point, we're at the very, very end, prevent scope creep. this is something this is emphasized with the game document as well, um, and you may see this with a lot of teams, is teams get overly ambitious. So they'll come up with an idea or a game concept and they say, oh man, I want my game to do this, this, and that. And that's fine and all. It's fine if you have uh, 5 different super cool ideas and mechanics for your game, but just work on doing one at a time, and just make sure the one at a time is fun. Just go piece by piece. With Mario, once again, make jumping fun. You made jumping fun, cool. Make obstacles. Is it avoiding obstacles great? Perfect. Okay, make one power up, the mushroom. Make them big, make them small. Perfect. Make enemies now. Do the enemies, how do the enemies work? Great. Is that fun? Yes. Can you make a game just from that? Sure. And then publish it. Oh, you want to add something extra? Do you have time? Let's add fireballs or an ice mechanic or the Tanuki suit. Just go one step at a time. Prevent yourself from falling into scope creep. All right, and that's it with a minute to spare. I am the real GOG on Twitch, Instagram, YouTube. I am lacking a little bit on YouTube. I need to post more on YouTube, but I am pretty active on Instagram and Twitch. My biggest game on Twitch is Mario Kart, which is why I made a Mario Kart board game. And once again, I am in the United States on Eastern time, so I stream Mario Kart around. This is my shameless plug, around 2 p.m. Eastern every Sunday. And that's it. Let me stop sharing. Stop sharing. Best game dev skill is knowing when to make scope smaller. Yeah, for sure. With Mario. Thank you so much. Yes, I hope you guys took something away from that. Once again, it's more like on the fundamentals I wanted to share, because I feel like it's a little bit overlooked, the value of the work you can do getting started before you get started. I am very open to questions, yes.
Hey, Gio. Thanks for
Hey,
being here.
welcome in. Yes, thank you so much.
It's very valuable information, and I remember the first game that I ever had. It was on Game Boy. It was Zelda.
Oh, sorry, which game was it?
Zelda
Oh,
on
Zelda.
Game Boy.
Okay, perfect. Yes.
Greenish pixels and everything. I have a question, and actually, I'm writing a game for a few months now. The game design document. I almost finished it. I only need to add pictures to have more clarity for describing the game and the gameplay and the features and everything. And I'm pretty much questioning which one should come first to the market, either the physical game. It will be a trading card game, and I want to make app of it. I still don't have the necessary skills to code the game. Obviously, I'm an artist, and I am questioning myself which one should come first to the market, either the physical game or the app, because I want them to be communicating together. Like if you have the cards in real life, you can include them into the app, etc.
I would say if you don't want to overly invest in your card game right away, like upfront, I would say develop your card game to a point that makes it playable. Once again, find the fun in it. Make sure it's balanced. Um, Forgive me. Let me know if I'm coming in and out with signal, by the way. So yeah, developed it to a point where it's playable. Maybe it doesn't have like every single card or feature that you want in it necessarily, but something that you can once again show off to other people, and then maybe recruit a programmer. Say, hey, look, let's play test this card game I made. Do you think it's doable for a program to be programmed essentially, and go from there. That would be my suggestion. Hmm. Okay. Hmm. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how you're feeling about like what you don't want to, or that you don't know what you want to build? Okay. So yeah, so that's perfectly fine. So a document, let me also um make an example out of this too. So just because you have your document as detailed as possible doesn't mean that your document has to be the full game before your game gets developed. You can make a document that does that grows with your game over time, right? So you can make your game document that is just about jumping and obstacles, and then later on when you are think of you maybe you brainstorm different mechanics or different power-ups either with yourself or with friends, and say, okay, what would be cool to add in, and then yeah, you can add those later into the document, and then therefore add those later into the video game. Nothing needs to. I guess the answer, which I'm hoping is a good answer, is nothing needs to happen all at once. You can definitely go at a slower pace because you're once again just layering to prevent the scope creep. Once again, to prevent overwhelming yourself, you just want to layer what you can do uh, from start. Get like a basic core concept. Get what your basic hook is of your game. Is your game, focused on dodging and parrying, and then work on that. Work on the design document for that. Maybe try to program it or get a friend to help you program it, and then go from there. Let me know if that answers the question or not, if I should add some extra clarity. Oh, okay. So yes. And actually, thank you so much for bringing that up because it is an excellent point. It's a great point. You cannot account for everything. And I'll give you an example. I worked on my own platforming game a long time ago, and it was a platforming game in space where my character had a jetpack, and so you could essentially like fly off. It was a 2D like side scroller, kind of like Mario 2, So you can use the jetpack and just fly off into space and fly off screen completely. And that was not something, even as like I've been designing a lot, that was not something I took in mind right away. I was like, oh crap, I can literally catapult my character all the way out in space. So then yeah, sometimes you're programming something and then you have to you realize that you need to add in certain mechanics or boundaries in this case, and then you work backwards. At that point, you do work backwards and you add it to your document and say, okay, when my character reaches this like y height, then they like lose, or maybe there's some kind of warning system. The screen flashes indicating that they're just way too high up, or maybe you do add an invisible wall. But yeah, some things can come a little bit after, as you start implementing and testing. The same thing with the board game, my Mario Kart board game. I wrote in mechanics for like dice roll and probabilities, and then on my first like super quick play tests, I realized things were not properly balanced whatsoever, and so that's something I like on my second iteration changed a lot of the documentation on. So yes, you can always change things and add, and sometimes your game comes you realize things after the fact.
Hello. Thank you for the
Oh,
presentation, first of all. So my question is, so I did, for example, I did make a design document at the beginning of the project, but over time, when more and more gets done, the project changes and shifts away from what the original document was. And so many mechanics might get cut or added, and mostly a lot of additions, level elements, mechanics, even sometimes like even the concept of the game changes a little bit.
mhm.
So, do you think like at some point another document gets made, or is it fine at that point to just go with the flow of what
So
you're adding?
right. So I think one of two things can happen. Essentially, you can, um, you know, change your document as you're changing your game, or you can just scrap your document and start over because you realize that your idea that you're developing is so much more different than the original concept that it's not even the same game essentially anymore. Like, oh, I've added so many different things now. It's not even the same. Um, so it's once again and thank you so much for bringing these things up, because there's a lot of nuance to this, right? Like there's only so much you can prepare for, right? Like yeah, I'm teaching or I'm advising preparation, but you cannot account for everything. You cannot account for changes. You cannot account for unforeseen events. Um, so what you, in my opinion, it's perfectly okay if things shift gears, but in my opinion you still want to maintain a game document, not just for communication but how should I say this, so even though you and your team may already know the new direction, sometimes you still want something to reference back to. Sometimes it just keeps your team in check, right? So you say, okay, like I've added all these changes to it, but and then you want to go ahead and go back to your document and either create a new document or update it. That way, like you can always say to your team, like, no, this is our new vision, this is our new direction, and once again prevent that scope creep, because your team might start to get ahead of itself and start to outpace your document. It will, like it's definitely possible for your game to outpace your document, but you don't want it to over outpace it to the point where you have nothing to fall back on in case something goes wrong, in case you lose the fun, in case you start to become over ambitious. So yes. I hope that answers your
Got
question.
it.
Let me know.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah, that makes
That
sense.
leads me to a new question I have, and it's from another point of view. For example, let's say we have a programmer in the team, okay, and we have the game design document. How do they go to the game design document to, for example, establish what are the rules that they need to follow when implementing, for example, a mechanic or something? I don't know if I
Yeah,
conveyed the
no,
question. Yeah.
that's good. So this is all about the once again the communication, right? A designer, I'm more when you're starting off with design, you're not gonna once again everything's a learning process. You're not gonna know like once again with like getting hit and everything freezes. That's not gonna come to mind intuitively at the start, and it's something that's gonna be play tested, and then you realize, oh wait, I actually do need to freeze time. But going with the programmer perspective, right? And you read this as a programmer. If I'm making your game and I'm a programmer, I do want to try to understand your vision as best as possible, because the more I have to go back to you and say, hey, like, can you explain to me what you mean by this? Like, that's once again time wasted. Unless like the two of you are sitting next to each other and saying and like working in tandem, and you're like one person's writing up documentation and mechanics and explaining things, the other person's like on the fly programming and testing it, and then the game designer is like seeing how this feels and whatnot. You want to try to eliminate, and once again, it's impossible. It's nothing's going to be perfect, but what the objective once again is to minimize wasted time with the effective communication. I see another question.
I think that your voice just got cut down at the end.
I
Cut off.
greatly apologize for that.
We didn't hear the last part of your answer, actually.
Oh, I greatly apologize for that.
No worries. It's okay. It happens.
Yeah. So the last part, what I was saying was, of your objective is to just minimize time, because as a programmer, you don't want to have to run back to your designer constantly for explanations of like, hey, can you explain like how this works? And sometimes the programmer may take liberties, and as a designer, you convey that like, hey, I just have like a vague idea of maybe how this is work. Maybe the designer gets your opinion. Like you wanna definitely be back and forth between your designer and your programmer. You know, is maybe in the moment like you sit down and go through the document together and get an idea, and then the programmer's like, okay, well, like, what about this, or what do you think about this? And the designer be like, yeah, you know what, that's not bad, or can that we make that happen, or is that too difficult to program? The programmer might realize, as a programmer, right, your job too is to realize um, the complexity of what the game designer is asking you. And so that point, as your job as a programmer is to tell your game designer, hey, like, I think you're going a little bit too far. I cannot make this, or I cannot make this in a timely manner, or I have to do this in a slightly different way to kind of get as close to the result as possible. Like you as the mechanic, as the programmer, you want to you have a big driving force as to what gets put into the product. Like the designer's like, yeah, this is what I want in the product. The designer's like, yes, I can actually put this in the product, or no, this is too difficult, this is too much. And I think it's perfectly okay for a programmer to take liberties as well, as long as there's the communication back and forth.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jayo, for your answers. I think we have. I don't know if we can take one last question, or if you have maybe something else that you need to attend to. And
I see this question. Do you know any board game where you build your town and manage resources like a city builder? Unfortunately, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I don't know one. I'm very sorry. I do have a lot of board games that nothing. Maybe we can design one. Maybe we can design a board game like that, and then it'll be the first on the market.
Yes, that would be a great idea, actually. So can we take one last question, or maybe?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm free. If
Okay,
somebody
okay.
else wants to.
Yeah, and we have MK with us. I don't know her name or his name. Go ahead, MK.
Maybe muted.
Yeah, you need maybe to unmute your mic. I guess it was. I don't know.
I will activating my that gets. Oh, there we go. Go ahead. Still me. Okay. While that's being figured out, I will add one more thing. There's been some interest in my Mario Kart board game. I just want to say, of course, it is unofficial, unlicensed. I'm not trying to sell it. But if anybody would like to kind of learn more about it or have more information or maybe bounce or maybe like they want to play test it themselves or maybe they want to make their own version of it. I will need a little bit of extra time, but I would be happy to share what I have and what I've created. If anyone interested, you can either DM me on Instagram, you can DM me on Discord, and I can get you all the Mario Kart board game files.
Yes, that would be fantastic, actually. I had a question about that, but I didn't want to take too much from your time.
Oh no, yeah, you're fine.
But let's see if MK first has his mic figured out. Maybe you can write down your question, MK. I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Yeah, if anything, go ahead and type out the question and I'll see it.
So my question was, so actually, why, not why, but don't you think that it would maybe be a great idea, for example, to take your adaptation of Mario Kart on a board game and make your own kart game, for example, a board kart game. I don't know how to call that, but yeah, and then
Yes,
sell it.
that's an excellent question, and I actually had a friend ask me the same question, and it is very accurate. I could remove all the like Mario licensed Nintendo elements from it, change up what the items are, but still maintain all the same mechanics. Because I mean, there's those other kart racers, right? There's the Sonic racing game, there's the Crash Bandicoot racing game,
Exactly, yeah.
and right, like they're all similar. They all have racing, they all have drifting, they all have items. So yeah, I can do that, right? And make my own like intellectual property, remove all the Mario Kart from it, and publish it. I'll be very transparent. I have other game ambitions in mind for myself. So I don't. This Mario Kart board game is not something I want to continue to pursue. I really just made it in the span of a few days for this specifically for this presentation and to kind of get the point
Oh,
across of
okay.
theming and testing out something and to show like how quickly you can do it, or like not you specifically but you as the audience can do that for yourselves. You make a board game in a couple days to test out something. But yeah, if once again, if anybody else wants those files and you can run with it, by all means. I'm not the type of person who's gonna like hold on to something and say, hey, that was my idea, I'm gonna chase you down, give me royalties or any of that.
You deserve it, actually. But I totally share your point of view. I love the way you are thinking, and actually, an idea at the end of the day is just an idea, and it's the execution that comes around it that make it matter the most.
Mhm.
But yeah, I totally respect your decision actually to do that. I guess is game theory's mathematical
As game theories,
principles.
mathematical principles used in board games. If yes, can you give us an example? Personally, I don't use game theory mathematics. I just, I'll be honest. I just think about once again my process, my own design process, right? Is I think of a concept. Okay, like what do I want to do? I'll give you an example of another board game I wanted to make. I thought of an eating game. Like you would force feed your opponents food and kind of like overstuff them different meals and dishes. So that was like my idea, right? And then I just kind of think about, okay, like what would be the food options? Um, how would they affect you? And just start small and kind of go from there. And then the like it would then of course come to a certain point where I need to work on balancing and are the card distributions correct, right? Like if you have a certain amount of card A versus card B versus card C, maybe you want more of card C but less of card A. um, so yeah, I kind of just take it I personally just take it a one step approach. I don't do anything like sciencey if that makes sense for my games. Sorry, I had tech issues with the mic. Thanks to the organizers for making this happen. My question is, which approach is more saving collective vision to how the game should be in all aspects, or a singular view? This is one of those like grow over time questions. At least that's the impression I get from it. So I think it's perfectly okay to start with a singular view, right? Yourself, maybe, if you are your own game designer. But there's something humble, I guess, to take the criticism and the feedback from your peers. It doesn't mean that just because someone who's also a quote unquote professional designer or programmer, right, and they say, "Oh no, your idea is trash," like they maybe, it doesn't mean that you have to, or they have like a very strict suggestion for you, right? Or even if I suggest something to you, it doesn't mean that you should just go ahead and change your game to fit my opinion or somebody else's opinion. Um, but sometimes, it is worth looking into or considering, or maybe considering an angle, right? So once again, for my space platformer game that I kind of mentioned, it was actually somebody else who gave me the suggestion. It was a peer who gave me the suggestion of a warning signal as my character was flying off into space that I didn't even consider. And I was like, oh, that's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that? Um, and then I can do it in my own way, right? Like maybe she had one particular idea of how to implement this warning system, but maybe in my head, like, no, that actually wouldn't look good from a player perspective. And let me try it a different way. But I still like the idea of it, the concept of it. So yeah, your vision can definitely start singular, and then when you find people that you vibe with, it can grow to be a collective thing. And you definitely want to embrace people that you can work with. um, I think a lot of things I want to add as well, and this kind of goes with my idea of like board game, the Mario Kart board game, is that some people get overly attached and hold their ideas too close to heart. um, and once again, you may have a very great idea, but sometimes if you just loosen up a little bit, as far as like don't like grasp your game too tightly. um, Sometimes if you just loosen up a little bit, you can definitely feed a lot more perspective into that, right? Get the opinions, get the perspective of other people, take what you like and you don't like, and then it would grow into something maybe that you didn't realize that it has the potential. It has more potential than you would have realized otherwise.
Wonderfully said, Jayo. Thank you so much for your time, for accepting to come and give this presentation.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and an honor, and I really hope that you guys have gotten value out of this. If anyone wants to bounce ideas off of me, or just once again, I'm not trying to steal your ideas, so don't hang on to it super tightly. But if anyone wants to like swing things by me and or like just talk about something, or you have interest in something, like my DMs are open on Discord, on Instagram, so you are more than welcome to reach out.
Yes, and we will be sharing your Instagram account and Twitch. I don't know if Selma was able to gather those links or not yet, but yeah, if we can just share them somehow.
I have that on screen. Everything is at the real GOG. It's all the same handle.
Okay.
It's literally my username. So you just search the real GOG on Instagram, on Twitch, YouTube. My Discord is the real GOG. I monopolize myself.
That's amazing. Actually, thank you so much. And don't hesitate anyone to follow the real GOG on YouTube, Instagram, Twitch. If you want to reach out, don't hesitate. Thank you so much, Jayo, and we hope that we can have you another time, inshallah. And thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, okay. Be well, everyone. Enjoy the game design process, write out your documentation, do your board games, your simple mechanics, and yeah, have fun with it. I mean, games are supposed to be fun. It's a lot of hard work, but it's supposed to be fun. And much love. Be well, everyone. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. You too. دونك الدراري شكرا بزاف. جوبونس نقدروا نهبطوا الجيم ديف داي فوكال. غادي نبارطاجي هنايا باش بغينا نزيدو نهضروا شي شويه. If anyone has more questions or anything, or if you want to discuss or anything together, you can do that. And thank you so much everyone, and catch you in I think مع 8:30 8:30 you can ترجعوا. We will be talking about multiplayer games. السلام عليكم.
Hey, salam.
صافا.
Alhamdulillah, ça va انت؟
Live. I don't understand the question. معرفش. ماشي. Invite people.
Oh, seriously.
MK واقيلا كنتي بغيتي تقول شي حاجة وما والو ما بغاش يخدم لك داك المايك.
تعكس لك بديك
تسمعوني؟
دابا كنسمعوك. يس.
خيرا. ما كتبش.
ما كتبش. ولكن راك سولتي الكويشن الصراحة كانت an interesting question.
آه،
لاباس
آه،
عليكم كلشي مزيان صحيحة.
والله أنا الحمد لله
الحمد
الله
لله
يحفظك.
بارك الله.
ميرسي صراحة زوين هاد الانفايتس كان زوين.
الله يحفظك. ان شاء الله تنحاولوا نديروا الماكسيموم باش نجيبوا زعما الناس اللي نقدروا نستافدوا منهم ككوميونيتي ونطوروا من راسنا، ويسبر تكونوا تعلمتوا شي حاجه مع جايو. وهادشي اللي كاين.
مم.
آه،
لا الله يرحم الوالدين، داكشي فيري نايس، خاصة مع هو خدم في داكشي ديال البورد جيمز
مهم.
برسبكتيف زعما شوية في شكل على اللي موالف.